What was the relationship towards your African employees?
I had a very good relationship with my workers, and some of them had been with me ever since I started. I not only looked after them, I also looked after their families, and the relationship, I'd say, was very good.
Although the blacks were better off than most other Africans, they voted for Robert Mugabe, who ruined the country. Were they naive, or what do you think was behind that support for him?
Well, we know for a fact that ever since Mugabe has come into power, there's been a lot of intimidation. And I know for a fact the very first election that they had, the intimidation was rife. And it was a 3-day voting period, and the word got out by the Majibas, who are young messengers, and so forth, that the first day was devoted to Mugabe. Anyone voting on the second and third day were sellouts, and that straight away was a form of intimidation, which has been proved every time there's an election. There's intimidation of the highest order, and that is why he appears to be so popular.
Can you please give several examples of what happened to white farmers during Mugabe's oppression?
Yes, I could, but I won't. It's too tragic. There's a whole list of farmers that were slaughtered during this period of the farm takeovers. And in my book, I have a list of approximately 16 farmers, I think it is, that have been killed at the hands of Mugabe's police and war vets.
How were you and your family affected by the land takeover?
The land takeover, or in other words, the land reform program, was instituted in 2000, and it affected us farmers in the way of an initial letter designating our farm. Initially, these letters were handed out, but eventually it was the farms were moving on at such a rate that it was just merely a letter in the newspaper. It was gazetted in the newspaper. Shortly after this gazetting, a delegation of people made up from government officials, police, army, and war vets would come to your farm, hand you an offer letter, and give you 24 hours to move. In my case, I just started reaping my citrus, and I had my whole year's work, the past year's work ahead of me. I still had to get that off, and I was trying to stall for time. I moved my wife off the farm because there was a distinct danger of something happening. I had a few bad scenes which I've described in my book, and generally, like so many other farmers, I just had to make plans to get off the land. We didn't have time to move our equipment. It's impossible to move your equipment in such a short time, and as it turned out, I lost most of my crops. I lost all my citrus, and I lost my sugarcane. The land reform program was meant to have been done in such a manner that the farmer would receive compensation. Well, that's a joke. There's been no compensation, and with this government there is definitely not going to be any compensation.
Now that your farm has been acquired, have the new occupants continued to farm it?
Not at all. The new occupants were made up of school teachers, policemen, a CIO, that's Central Intelligent Officers, people who have not the remote idea of how to farm. They were allocated my farm. I returned there a year ago and it's a shambles. There's no more fruit coming off, there's no sugar coming off. And I don't know why it was taken. I might add that very few of the farms that have been taken over from the 4,500 farmers have been successfully farmed, despite what government have promised, etc., etc. I must also add at this stage that the new occupants all get cheap fertilizer, get cheap fuel, and in most cases they've taken those commodities and resold them at large profits. And those commodities have not gone to where they were meant to, i.e. fertilizing the crops or providing fuel for tractors, etc. They've been sold.
Can you describe how you felt when all this was happening to you, when they were demanding you be removed from the farm?
Well, at first I tried to fight it legally. I had a lawyer in Harare, and in Chiredzi in fact, whom I was dealing with, and I actually took them to court initially. And in most cases I won my case. But as soon as the lawyers or the court gave a judgment against the perpetrators and issued an order for them to be removed off the land, they did exactly as they wanted. The police, instead of throwing them off, assisted them on staying on the farm. So in other words, this was, and the reasons given by the police was, it's a government decision, we cannot interfere. Nowhere in the world do you do that. The government, the police are there to enforce the law, no longer in Zimbabwe. In most cases, we've noticed that the police have, in fact, assisted the A2 or the new occupants. I felt, eventually I had a helpless feeling. There was nothing I could do. I tried every legal aspect that I could. I tried the police, they basically laughed at me. And eventually, it was starting to get dangerous. I'd moved Joan, my wife, off, and I tried to hang in to at least get some of my crop off. In the end, it was impossible for me to even walk into my own fields because there were guards at every entrance, and I was physically barred from going in there. I was quite lucky in that I didn't have too many physical brush-ups. I was beaten up once, but apart from that, it was okay. But you never knew. I was seeing all around the country similar action was taking place where farmers were getting beaten up badly, and quite a few deaths took place. It got to the stage where I knew I was wasting my time. What could I achieve by sitting there in an empty house and hoping for this mob to go? And there were a lot of those people there, living and sleeping around my house, in the yard, my farmyard. They were camped. They weren't going to leave. And eventually I packed up and I walked off. That's right, they also trashed a lot of my equipment, a lot of my things, and I got the message, I'm getting out of here.